Hey, Fitheads. Today we talk with Jess Evans. She's a fighter, a trainer at FightCamp, probably superhero, yet to be confirmed.
Did we have the first real fight camp is talk about it because it's great.
Yeah, right.
You can't stop talking about it. That was fun. Yeah. She was awesome. She's a boxer, Muay Thai, or she's had actual bouts in boxing and Muay Thai, and something else too. I can't remember. She's a superhero. It's incredible.
Yeah. Her journey is crazy, and where she is now, the ending was like super inspiring. If you want to go take on life, make it to the end, because I need to go build my business and my pecs. Everything about this was really uplifting.
It was amazing. We started out talking. I remember thinking like, cool, boxing, that's fun. And then we talked about like women's empowerment and like how to get like comfortable with being uncomfortable, how to make big life decisions. Vince Van Gogh shows up for a minute there at the end. It was so inspiring. It was awesome.
Welcome to Total Fitheads.
Serious fitness for not so serious people.
Hi, Jess. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Is Jess okay, or is it Jessica? I don't want to get beat up.
No, it's actually a funny story. So my name is Jessica, but I lived overseas in Australia, and they're notorious for shortening your name and not telling you. So Jess stuck. So I lived there for 4.5 years, and people just call me Jess now, so I don't mind.
You're lucky it's not J.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'll take J. I'll take Jess. I prefer not Jessie, but any name's fine.
Okay, love it. So tell the fit heads about how you got started in fitness. We want to hear your origin story.
Totally. Well, actually, like in fitness, it goes back like ages ago. I have been doing sports since I was 4. My parents were, my mom was a collegiate ball player, raised us all 4 of us siblings in lots of sports. So started off with basketball. Then I was a swimmer for a very long time, cross-country runner, track runner, and everything. I know. I told you I did a lot of sports. I competed and honestly, I tried all the others as well. Softball, gymnastics, you name it. But for me, I did sports all through high school, everything, but it wasn't until after high school when I was like entering into college. I was also kind of like in a not so healthy relationship, a very, very toxic relationship when I was 18, 19 years old. And when I finally decided to leave that relationship, it was, when I say toxic, I mean like it was abusive. And when I decided to leave that relationship, I was like, he was a fighter. And I was kind of being told about this world of fighting. I didn't really know anything about it. It's not really something you do as like a high school sport unless you do it outside of high school. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to learn how to defend myself. So this never happens again. I wasn't going to allow that to happen again. And I was like, I started it when I was 21. So there was a couple years in between of like a healing process for me. I held on to like a lot of resentment, but I knew that going into it, I was like, I kind of feel like this resonates with a lot of fighters. I feel like a lot of fighters kind of start their journey out of some type of pain or some type of hunger of like where they come from, like whether that be poverty or, like Mike Tyson's story, he like came from extreme poverty and then like being caught in the system and with drugs and all this stuff. I think that a lot of it starts with pain. And I think that was my start. I was in pain, like being in a relationship where someone was supposed to love me, and I didn't feel like that was reciprocated in a positive way. And man, that's kind of just where the journey started. It started when I was 21. I'm 31 now. I know people think that I look like I'm 24, but I am in fact 31.
What is your night routine?
Everyone asks me like what my age is. I tell you water and healthy and
careful. We don't want to put the skincare industry out of business. It's just water. It's just like That's the secret.
Yeah, that's kind of like, I guess, like a long version of like where it all started. I've always done sports. I've always been interested in it. But you want to know what's really cool about fighting? It was something that I chose. You know, like when you're younger and your parents kind of choose things for you of what they believe you could do great at. They chose that for me. And I'm so thankful because it did give me work ethic and discipline. And it helped me be an athlete that carried into my future. But this was the first thing that I chose for myself. And I think that's as well why it's something that's just always stuck for me.
Yeah, interesting. Do you think there should be more accessibility or representation of fighting sports for those younger ages? Do you wish that you'd have been introduced to it younger?
100%. You know, you want to know who's really good at stuff like this? Probably like Taekwondo schools and karate, like really strong disciplines, and jiu-jitsu as well. Really, really strong disciplines. But to be honest, you know, women weren't even introduced to the UFC until I was in college.
Oh, wow.
So the
I didn't
fact,
know
like,
that.
yeah, like fighting, and I think if I remember correctly, don't quote me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is right. Women didn't even start boxing until the 90s, like competition.
Oh, wow.
And I'm a 90s child. So it just like, it wasn't something that was very common for women. And now it's like a booming industry where women are learning that, hey, you know, I'm strong, I'm capable, I can compete in this sport as well. And it's awesome. I wish there was more accessibility when I was younger, but here I am now. And I just want to help be that for other women that don't believe that it's possible for them. I want to help be that bridge for them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And once you were exposed to it, how important were having good coaches? I feel like every fighter always talks about who trained them like this, or they're such a strong character in every boxing story is the coach, right? Can you talk a little about that?
Yes, honestly, like your coach is the person that you go to war with. You know, like when you're out there, it's a war, it's a fight or flight mode. I can't explain it. Only other fighters know what it's like. Like when you step into a ring or a cage and you're like, I'm not getting out of this unless you get knocked out or I get knocked out or like we go the distance. It's like that person there needs to be such a strong bond between you and your coach, that there's such a level of trust. And I have been so privileged to have had so many great coaches. From my very first boxing coach being Melvin Wesley out of Kansas City, to Brian Carroll when I switched to Muay Thai, to then moving to Australia and being with the McKinnon brothers, who are such OGs in the game. They're well renowned over there, to then moving over here and being with Chuy Gutierrez and some other phenomenal coaches. And I'll probably miss some of them. Oh yeah, Rodney Williams in Australia as well. Honestly, your coach matters so much because they need to know when you're having an off day. They need to know when, like, you know what, you need to go home and rest. It's such like a physically draining sport because, you know, you might be doing running and swimming, like a lot of cross training on top of sparring, bag work, core conditioning, like strength and conditioning. So I just want to say, I always tell people that my story is I stand on the shoulders of giants. I stole that, by the way, from Tim Ferriss. But I love that saying, that like where I am is because I'm literally on the shoulders of giants. And I want to be that shoulder for somebody else as well.
Yeah. Can we go back for a sec? Can you talk a little bit about, was there any change in your confidence or personality or sort of settled once you started doing combat sports in general? Or, I mean, I think a lot of chicks might like to hear, no, I'm just kidding. I think it's important, you know, it settles you down. It gives you a little bit more of a sense of, obviously they don't need to come from a terrible situation, and obviously they don't need to compete like you did, but I think it might help to hear.
You know what? That's actually such a good question. And that's what I think people tell me now. They're like, I wouldn't mess with you, you know? I would definitely say that when I got out of the relationship that I was in, I was broken. I was in a very manipulative relationship. I was like 97 pounds. I naturally walk around like about 120. I was pretty like depressed. I didn't know who I was really anymore. Something that fighting gave me once I started to learn this skill set was the first thing, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily a healthy thing, but I was like, try me. You know? And I know, but like, I was like, I had this thing where I was like, never going to back down from a man, where I would literally be in the ring. Like I said, I don't necessarily believe that this is the right route, ladies, but I was like in the ring and I would not let a man drop me. I had this mentality in me that I was not going to allow a man to see me weak. Now, the good news is that I definitely healed from this process. I think it's really important to heal from the things that hurt us in order to, you know, come from a more of like a powerful perspective rather than a broken one. But I will say that I definitely walk around. I don't walk around like being ignorant to the fact that I could be harmed. You know, I don't walk myself into dangerous situations where I'm like, come on, you want to go? You want to go? What I
just parking in the back of Walmart at night.
Hey, you want to go? Let's go. You know, I'm not trying to like pull up on street fights or something, but what I will
but
say,
I could, but I don't want to.
I do walk around with more confidence, knowing that I do know how to protect myself. And I will say this, it is so important for women and men, but women to know how to protect themselves. And I'm talking girls from a young age. And I don't just mean protect yourself physically, but also protect yourself mentally from manipulation and predators. Because it's scary, but it's a real thing. It's, you know, the real world can be a little bit scary. And I just think that we need to educate women how to be a little bit more street smart and red flags to look for earlier on.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You talk about the mentality of like being in the ring, it just like changing you. Obviously I cannot wrap my head around that. Max, maybe has a wrestling background. So.
Ooh, yeah.
I wrestled in college. I found that it was, as an adolescent boy, man, high school, you know, it was just sort of like it settled me a lot. I was very insecure. Oh man, would I be okay if I got into a fight? And then in high school, wrestling gave me this idea of like, well, maybe I wouldn't win, but I'd know how to handle myself. I'd survive. Now, what I find with a lot of my girls in my life, or we'll be watching a show or whatever, and there'll be an attack and they're like, I would have no idea. I don't even know what I do. And I'm like, well, run away first. But you know, that it's such a difference. I see that sort of, that idea of like, I don't know if I'd survive, but I'd know what to do. I'd have the beginnings of an idea of what to do. You know, I think that's really important. And it's weird, not weird, but it's a bummer that like, more little girls aren't introduced to combat sports earlier. I think it'd be really, really cool for a lot of people. It'd give them a lot more, not just like put them at ease a little bit more. I feel like that's sort of the feeling that I get.
Well, I think what's interesting is that like for such a long time, the reason why I think women couldn't even get into sports to begin with is because society said that it's very unladylike. But, you know, women are incredibly strong. Women have children. Women, you know, our pain tolerance is so high, but not even just that. I think women are very gritty, just as much as men. And I tell you, some of the female fights I watch are sometimes more entertaining. It's like women are scrappy and
but can they dunk?
You know? It's true. You know, some women can dunk. Some women can't dunk.
Totally kidding.
Yeah, you hear what I'm saying? You know?
Yes, absolutely.
Don't get me started on basketball. Oh my God.
Yeah. The mental shift is so interesting to me. Even like, can you speak about like the even shorter shift from training to sparring and how that kind of changed you?
Yes. So this once again goes back to kind of like that beginning period when I was kind of like doing it maybe for the wrong reasons. I was doing it a little bit out of resentment, but this is, I feel like, really important. I would go to sparring. First of all, I would get dropped by 14-year-old boys, like all the time. Like I'm talking liver shots. I didn't know how to protect myself. I didn't know how to protect my face. I didn't know how to move. And when you start having things come at your face, what do? You blink because that's a natural reaction. But when
I take up cross stitch.
Exactly. When you fight, you cannot blink. You have to be able to stare a punch in the face and evade it or block it or counter it. And that was a huge adaptation for me. So I contacted one of my friends who was an MMA fighter. I said, I want you to spar me in the ring and just throw punches at my head until I stop blinking. Once again, I don't advise this, ladies, but I was so hungry.
But you lived a movie, and this is one of the scenes.
I was so hungry to learn and so hungry to learn fast that I was willing to do anything because I wanted to prove that I could do it and that I could fight and that I could protect myself. So I would say that, when you start sparring, it's so different than regular training. It really does bring out the fight or flight mentality. I see some people in the gym that look amazing on the bag. They look solid on pads. But when they have a punch come at their face, they're done. They're like, no, not for me. It really takes like a certain hunger and discipline, like you might not get it every time. That's okay. It's a learning curve. But the thing that people don't like is that it's painful. You have to be able to fight through that pain. You have to be very resilient.
Yeah.
Because I commend all fighters. I give everyone a round of applause who is a fighter and competes in combat sport, because you have to not just do it that day. You have to turn around, wake up and do it again and again and again. And that's just like your life. So I would say that it really is a lot of mental strength that I gained from the switch over from just training to sparring, and not just sparring anybody. I was sparring men, getting knocked down by men, getting up again, going again. I will say that this was all watched by coaches, by the way. So, like I have to say that disclaimer, like it wasn't like I was getting bashed or something and I was like concussed. Like it was all done with headgear and in a proper like format.
Of course. Yeah.
I will say that I think it's like a lot of things. It's just scary. The more time you put into it, the more comfortable you get with it. It's scary in the beginning, so it's different from a lot of things because it's scary.
Right? Exactly.
What sort of things? How about this? What sort of accessory things do you think help that learning curve the fastest, other than getting dropped by guys all the time?
Well, like I said, now there's a lot more females in the game. So there's a chance that maybe a gym you walk into will have a lot more females. So you won't just be sparring. But when I was doing it, it was far and few. Mm-hmm. But what your question is what tips would you say? What
do you think other than drilling and training and sparring? What do you think would help your learning curve the first? Footwork, accessory work, stretching, your
deadlift,
cardiovascular, deadlift, strength. What do you think helps the fastest?
I think a strength is, well, I'm a visual learner. So, and I would like to say that most people are visual learners. Watch other fighters. Watch other fighters on YouTube. Watch tape. In basketball in high school, they call it tape. Watch film. Watch other fighters that you aspire to be like, or you feel like they're more your style. I would watch this Muay Thai fighter when I was fighting Muay Thai called Bukal. He is this huge Thai fighter. It's spelled Buakaw. And I just was like, oh my gosh, I want to learn how to push kick like him. And you want to know what? The funny thing is, my best kick and the kick that I get the most compliments on is the push kick. But I studied it and I practiced it and I perfected it. Now it's not perfect. I still have things to learn, obviously, with it. So I would say the first thing is to study tape. The second thing I would say is 100% footwork. Most good coaches start you on footwork before you do anything. Because in order for you to move the way you need to and to transfer the weight properly for fighting and get out of the way is with your feet. It's not going to be with your head because you'll probably get hit. We always say that you're going to get hit, but we want to lessen the chances of how much you get hit. But it's a fighting sport. You're going to get hit, but let's lessen the impact, or let's lessen how many times we get hit. So I would definitely say footwork. You can do ladder drills. Jumping rope is huge in the fight world. You're going to have to get comfortable jumping rope. If you don't like it, you got to do it. You're going to have to do things you don't like. You can also do things with cones where you move in and out. You stay light on your feet, work on shadowing with that. And then I would say the third thing is finding good training partners. And this is a really important one because you're going to be afraid of someone who's trying to hurt you. But really what you want is you want to be with training partners that are trying to better you. And unfortunately, in the fight world, there are some people who can be, mean people. And there's a lot of ego in the sport. Just make sure you're surrounding yourself with people that are willing to kind of go on the journey with you and not scare you away from it. I think that good training partners is a key part of your success moving into sparring, but then also in your success if you want to take it further.
Yeah, it's like I tell people something similar, but an easier way to sort of visualize that for people that aren't into that. Like imagine playing tennis with somebody you don't want to play tennis with somebody that's way better than you. Totally. Or way worse than you. Cause then it's just not, you know what I mean? It's just not a good, it's not a good workout. It's not a good learning lesson. It's not a good anything.
Agree. Wait, can you imagine if someone's just serving it as hard as they can and you can never get it back? What's the point?
Well, I learned that lesson because my friend was very, very good at tennis. And I was like, well, this is dumb, guys. I'll see you later. I'm going home.
I totally agree. I think it translates into fighting as well.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about doing Muay Thai. Can you talk about the transition from boxing to Muay Thai? Which one's cooler? How you switched?
Oh gosh, I can't say which one's cooler because first of all, I'm going to make a lot of people mad. Second of all, I don't know if I could really choose because they're so different. When I transferred over into Muay Thai, I had just fought in a boxing tournament. So let me talk to you about this timeline a little bit. Like I said, I wanted to learn fast. So I started boxing in a boxing gym with my coach and everything when I was 21 in 2012. 2013, that summer. So we're talking 6 months later, I fought in the world boxing tournament in Kansas City because I tell you, I was so hungry to learn. And you want to know what's crazy? I won 2 fights and I lost in the finals to a girl who was much more experienced than me. But I was really proud of myself.
Everyone was.
Right? And what's funny? My parents were like, what do you mean you're boxing in a boxing tournament? They were still I think still to this day, my parents are I think they've gotten used to it now. They're not surprised anymore by me, by all the things that I bombard them with. But I fought in that tournament because I was so determined And my coach approved. He's like, yeah, he's like, I think you're ready to compete. Then afterwards, I immediately went over to Muay Thai. I was like, okay, I want to try something different. I immediately went to Muay Thai, and it was, and I fought 2 times at the end of that year in Muay Thai. Like, guys, I fought 4 times, 5 times in my first year of fighting because I was that determined. But it's a different rhythm, but I like it because you get to use, it's called the art of 8 limbs. You can punch, you can kick, you can knee, and you can elbow. And to me, I was like, oh, this is like such an aggressive sport, but it's also like so strategic. And then when I moved to Australia, Australians, man, are good Muay Thai fighters. And I want to say that it's because they're close to Thailand. So their geography kind of benefits them in that way. There's a lot of Thai trainers who train Australian fighters in Australia. And that kind of showed me different avenues of kickboxing. There's also Dutch style kickboxing. And then there's also just traditional K1 kickboxing, which is you can't clinch. So in Muay Thai, you can clinch and just knee the crap out of your opponent if you wanted. In K1, you can't do that. But in Muay Thai, you can tie yourself up and just knee them until the ref breaks it. It was tough transferring over because it's different footwork. It's different style. You can't bob and weave as much because you have to worry about getting kicked in the face. So there was a lot of new things that I needed to take on board, but I was up for the challenge. And like I said, I can't say that one's better than the other.
I don't know, 6 more limbs.
Right? But what I will say is, and I say this to anyone, I recommend starting with boxing first. If you eventually want to move into kicking, get your hands right first. And the reason why I say that is because you need to build a strong foundation, build a solid stance, learn how to keep your hands up, learn how to still slip and move your head and take punches to the face, because sometimes you can feel very overwhelmed learning all of it at the same time. And it's really good to have a strong foundation of good hand speed, good like power. So I'm not saying one's better than the other, but what I will say is I recommend starting with boxing first and kind of get grounded in that first and then add on from there.
Yeah, you start from 0 to 8. Well, I guess you should start with dancing before you start with boxing.
True.
Ballet.
You know, Lomachenko, the boxer, his dad made him take, I don't remember how much time off. It was like at least like half a year and just do dancing. And it's because
that's the footwork.
It was going to teach him like the footwork and the rhythm. And it was cool because it was really good for his brain to do that.
Bruce Lee was the cha-cha king of Hong Kong, I believe.
Really? I didn't know that.
Cha-cha champ.
Fine.
Wow.
I'm serious.
I didn't even know that. That's amazing. That makes sense.
I think it's the cha-cha champ. Wait a minute.
I love that so much. That's cool.
That Max and I talk about this a lot. The idea of proprioception and like knowing where your body is in space, which I think dancers have that, wrestlers have that, and then also ties into visually modeling someone, like you said, watching someone fight, but then being able to emulate that. Not everybody has that skill, and you know, when you start young, it feels natural to you. You don't even think about it.
Martial artists have very good body awareness. At least the good ones do. You know, because there are some martial artists that have no body awareness, you know, but ones that are trained properly, you have to have body awareness. You need to know where you're transferring your weight. Are you using too much arm, or are you using your core? You need to know when you're feeling off, when your body's tired and depleted, when it's at its best. It is so important to have good body awareness in fighting. And I would say most of the people that I've trained with have impeccable body awareness.
Yeah. And that feels like something that you sort of learn maybe at a young age. I guess I want to ask about genetics versus just putting in the work, right? With basketball, it's very clear, tall people are going to do better and there's like a genetic advantage. Do you see are there any features of boxing where there's more of a genetic advantage? This is also me being like, you're a freak and you probably just were born crazy enough to do 4 fights in 1 week.
I like this question because I get this a lot. Obviously, I've played basketball with extremely tall people that can't jump to save their life. And Muggsy Bogues, he was like, 5'3", and he could dunk. I do think that
really, I thought he was just busy being a fast point guard. He could dunk.
He could dunk. He had an impeccable vertical, like way above his height. So obviously people with the height advantage, anyone born with solid genetics obviously have some sort of advantage. But I know people with great genetics that have no discipline. And I think sometimes when you have this advantage as like an athlete, it can overshadow the discipline and the dedication that you need. Not saying that it always happens. Really, the best athlete is one where you can mix this beautiful mix of genetics and talent, talent, skill set, dedication, all of that. That's when you have and that's the ultimate. That's Mike Tyson. Mm-hmm. That's Muhammad Ali. That's the greats. But it's so rare. And I always say that hard work always beats talent, because you can be in there and you can be naturally gifted, but if you don't have the hard work and the discipline rooted inside of you, you will lose. You will lose in the final rounds when it comes down to who has the most heart. Back to what I was saying is I do think the genetics helps. I think it can give you an advantage. It's kind of like the difference between somebody starting on second base and someone starting at the plate. But I didn't start till I was 21. And I think I did pretty good. I get complimented by great fighters, on social media. Like I'm talking like the elite, like in MMA and in different sports, about my technique. And that had nothing to do with me starting from an early age. That had everything to do with me. I mean, I do believe that I'm an athletic individual, but it had everything to do with hunger. I think hunger is really important. You can fake it in another sport, but you can't fake it in fighting. You're going to see someone's true colors in fighting. So I think that it really comes down to hard work and discipline.
Love it. Yeah, I love the idea that hard work beats talent. You can't just be born into success.
Michael Phelps actually says it. So Michael Phelps, let's be honest, he was born an amphibian.
Yeah. His hands are like huge.
He's the perfect prototype of a swimmer. He's lean, he's broad, he's tall. You're right, he has big hands, he has big feet. Granted, your body changes based on what sport you play or you do through puberty. So a lot of his body grew and adapted to the sport that he was doing. However, I have to use him as an example because he said, there were days that I didn't want to wake up. There was days I didn't want to go swim. He swam for like 6 hours a day, 6 hours a day. He's like, but I had to do it anyways. And I think that's kind of like the whole Mamba mentality, the Kobe mentality of like, I don't feel like doing it. Sure, I might be, like gifted, but hard work still has to happen. To be great at anything, you have to be willing to put in the hard work. And that's why I say that it beats talent.
Yeah, you have to be able to do things to stand discomfort or do things you don't like or
push through this
stuff. Get uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You've made a lot of uncomfortable decisions, big decisions in your life. You you started fighting as a as a gal, you moved to Australia, you switched combat sports halfway, you've done, how do you make big decisions?
I'm so glad you asked this question. This is so good. This is not very profound, but this is something that I have done my entire life, because I also moved to California by myself, moved overseas by myself as a very young girl, not knowing anyone, not having any connections. A lot of people are afraid of risk. And I would say that compared to the average person, I'm probably a risk taker, but my mentality is do it scared. Life is scary, but I have not regretted anything that I have done scared in the moment. It was very scary taking on fighting. It was scary being in an unhealthy relationship. It was scary moving overseas by myself, like taking that risk, starting at a new gym, starting school over there. It was scary moving to California. It was scary going unemployed during the pandemic. But my advice, and I say this to anyone who asks me this question because I think it's a really important one, is that anything in life worth going after, you're going to have to do it scared. And I think that when you're in that uncomfortable place, that's when you know that you're making the right choices. That's when you know that growth is happening. And all of these scary decisions that I've had to make in my life have been the ones with the most growth opportunity. So if I had to go back and do it all over again, I'm not saying that I would put myself in an unhealthy relationship, but I gained something from that. I learned from that. I believe there's purpose in pain. There in all these different painful situations that I've been in, I've done it scared, and there's been so much purpose that has came out of it on the other side.
Yeah, I'm so inspired.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Yeah, about to run through a wall.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, can we talk about what you're doing now? I guess post-pandemic now. Yeah, let's speak about that.
So post-pandemic, so this is really interesting. So this part you don't know about me. So my past, I was actually in production. So I was an associate producer, and I came over to California as an associate producer. I worked in some industry work in Australia as well, and I worked for a nonprofit. Came over here, was doing show things. This is the stuff I knew, and fighting and training and all this is just like my passion, my extracurricular activities. And then the pandemic hit. And I think the pandemic rocked a lot of people's worlds. And for me, I was like, I really need to use this as a time to reevaluate. And can I also say this? This is a very, very important part of my story as well. In 2019, the year prior to the pandemic in 2020, my brother passed away, my younger brother. And for me, that was like, what am I doing with my life? I was in production. I wasn't necessarily happy. And I'm not saying that we do things that just make us happy, but I do think it's important for you to feel like you are doing what you are called to do or what you're purposed to do. Because I believe that everyone is purposed with different things in their life, and it goes hand in hand with maybe their personality, their skill set, their drive, what fuels them. And I just knew, like, when that happened, I think when really tragic or like big things happen in your life, it makes you question everything. And I really questioned. So this is a wild time. My brother passed in March of 2019. I got married in September or late August 2019. Then the pandemic happened. Both my newlywed husband and I ended up having to be stuck in a 700 square foot apartment working from home. And I reevaluated everything. Then he lost his job. Then I lost my job. We were both furloughed. And this the reason why this plays such a significant part is because, once again, it's when life happens, because it always does. And it can be anyone's story, anything that happens in your life. You have the opportunity to be like, am I going to cower or am I going to fight? And in that moment, especially when my brother passed, I'm so sorry, I was like, this is my fight or flight moment in my life. It was really, really important. And I told my husband and I told each other, we're like, you know what? We're going to be okay. Like, we're going to work through this. I mean, we're living in California. And it was also at this time that I found out that my job, because I had worked for a nonprofit at the time, didn't even pay unemployment. Couldn't get it. It was a very big ball of events. But you want to know what's beautiful about weathering a storm? Is that there's always sunshine afterwards. And man, in 2021, so after I just lost my job prior to Christmas, I was sitting down with a friend that I knew from Australia, because life just has a beautiful way of aligning itself the way that it needs to. And he worked in production. He's like, so what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know, I guess I'm just going to freelance, and I'm going to figure out what it is. And at this time I was building up like my training Instagram, and like, because people have always wanted to see like what I do for training. And he's like, oh, one of our friends works for a boxing company. It's online. I was like, perfect. I'll just hit him up and say, hey, if you need a model to do some boxing shoots for you, I'd love to do it. And he's like, actually, they're about to hire a trainer. I was like, okay. And then he's like, but it's full time. I was like, perfect. I got all the time in the world. And then he was like, but you have to have fought. Perfect. You have to have group training experience. Perfect. I have all of that. And it was, a big tryout, audition, Zoom interviews, all of this. But by the end of September of 2021, last year, I walked into my job that I'm at now, FightCamp, never having thought that I would walk into a job that I feel so purposed for. And man, it didn't come easy. But as I walked into this job, I realized that everything that had happened to me from age 21 made sense. I work in a job where I can fight and train people and help people learn how to protect themselves, mixed with production value. Literally, best of both worlds that I have ever done for the last 10 years. And I'm just in so much awe. Just so much awe, looking back, introspectively looking at who I've become. And I know it doesn't end there, like more is to come. And that's what I look forward to. But I'm just very grateful with where I am now.
That's freaking fantastic. Yeah, they say that the reason people feel purpose is that they're uniquely challenged in a way that is wholly themselves. And it seems like you fit into exactly that every part of what makes you is what you're using now in your career. How crazy.
100%.
That's what we're all trying to achieve.
Right? Exactly. And now that I have that, because there's this quote by Vince Van Gogh. I just love this. I want to say this. And he goes on about how he says, hold on one second. I want to get this right. So I'm just going to quote Vince Van Gogh, because I don't want to
text your buddy Vince.
No, I'm going to.
What did you say the other day? He's like, I don't know. I can't hear you. I'm missing an ear.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Oh, the art degree was not a waste. I got to use it on my fitness podcast.
Okay, here it is. I love this. And this is something I feel like I knew and I resonated with from a very young age. And I want everyone to hear this, and I want this to resonate with somebody. And it is, if I am worth anything later, I am worth something now. For wheat is wheat, even if people think it is grass in the beginning.
Whoa.
And when I read that, I was like, I always believed from a very young age, and I believe that hope and belief in yourself and what you are capable of is extremely important. And obviously that comes down to your parents, outside influence, personality, a mixture of things. I always believed from a young age that I was destined to do something so much greater than myself. I remember thinking this when I was 10, hence why I moved overseas by myself. I knew that was going to happen. So as I walk into what I believe is more of my purpose, maybe not all of it, but more of my purpose, I want that for everybody. And I want other people to know that it is possible as well. I think sometimes we become so distraught with the idea of not believing that our dreams are possible, but they are. But as you can see, my path hasn't been clean. Life is just as many lows as it is highs. But I think that something that I've taken over from fighting that is so applicable to life is resilience. Resilience through the tough times. And I don't mean rushing through it, 10-year journey for me. And it probably even started obviously much younger. But I want that for everyone. I want everyone to believe and to know that their dreams are possible, that what it is that they want to do at the end of the day can become a reality as well.
Wow. Sorry to the audio listeners. Max and I are just stunned.
Yeah.
You guys just blessed me so much. Thank you.
Blessing us. Honestly, that's it. I feel like we need to end on this high note. What a great culmination of this podcast. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you for having me. I feel so honored.
Heck yeah. And where can the Fitheads find you online?
Yes. So you can get me, you can see the awesome company that I work for at FightCamp or at joinfightcamp.com, or you can hit me up on Instagram at Jess Evans Fit if you want to see all of my training and all the fun stuff that I do.
Heck yeah. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
And thanks to the Fitheads. If you can rate and review on Apple Podcasts, that helps us out a whole lot. And we'll see you next week.